What does a billionaire do when he thinks no one understands him? He reveals his true self. For Klaus Richter, a man who could buy and sell entire city blocks, a quiet waitress was nothing more than furniture, an object unworthy of respect. In the opulent bubble of a Michelin star restaurant, he decided to amuse his clients by insulting her in his native German, using words laced with venom and contempt. He thought his cruelty was a secret, a private joke. But he made one catastrophic mistake. He assumed she was just a waitress. He never imagined that his ugly words, spoken in a language he thought was his shield, would be the very key to his downfall, and that her reply, delivered in a single perfect sentence, would shatter his world. This isn't just a story about an insult. It's about the moment a titan's power crumbled because he underestimated the woman pouring his water. The air and aura, a restaurant so exclusive it didn't have a sign, tasted of money. It was a subtle blend of aged leather from the banquettes, truffle oil from the kitchen, and the expensive, understated perfumes of its clientele. For Olivia Rose, it was the smell of survival. At 24, she moved through this gilded cage with a grace that belied the bone-deep weariness she felt. Each perfectly polished wine glass, each meticulously folded napkin, was a step towards paying the rent for the tiny apartment she shared with her younger brother, Liam. Olivia wasn't supposed to be here. She was supposed to be in her final year at Georgetown, finishing her double major in international relations and Germanic linguistics. She was supposed to be analyzing foreign policy texts, not deciphering the passive-aggressive whims of Manhattan's elite. But a head-on collision on a rainy Tuesday 2 years ago had stolen her parents and her future, leaving her as the sole guardian of a traumatized 15-year-old boy. The scholarships, the ambitious career path, the life she had meticulously planned, it all evaporated in the screech of tires and the shattering of glass. Now her world was about balancing trays, managing Liam's therapy appointments, and pushing down the constant, gnawing anxiety that one misstep, one dropped plate, could send their fragile life spiraling. Table 7 needs their check, Olivia, and the Richardsons are here. Put them at 12. Mr. Dubois, the restaurant's perpetually stressed manager, hissed as he swept by, his face a mask of strained hospitality. "Of course, Mr. Dubois," Olivia replied, her voice a calm, professional murmur. She was good at her job. She was observant, efficient, and had a preternatural ability to remain invisible until she was needed, the hallmark of truly great service. She knew which clients preferred their water with no ice, who was allergic to shellfish, and which power couple was on the verge of a very public, very quiet divorce. She was a silent keeper of secrets, a ghost in a crisp black uniform. Tonight the air was particularly charged. A reservation had come in under the name Richter, Klaus Richter. Even Olivia, who had disconnected from the world of global finance, knew that name. Richter Industries was a behemoth, a German industrial giant that had its tentacles in everything from automotive manufacturing to pharmaceuticals. Klaus Richter was its patriarch, a third-generation billionaire known for his ruthless business tactics and an almost pathological aversion to the press. He was old-world power, a man who didn't follow trends because he created them. When he arrived, the restaurant seemed to hold its breath. He wasn't a large man, but he radiated an aura of immense, unyielding gravity. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than Olivia's car. His silver hair was perfectly coiffed, and his eyes, a piercing shade of Arctic blue, scanned the room with a look of profound boredom and disdain. He was flanked by 2 younger, nervous-looking men in suits, and a third older Asian gentleman, Mr. Chen, whose serene expression was a stark contrast to the palpable tension emanating from Richter. Mr. Dubois practically genuflected as he led them to the best table in the house, a secluded corner booth with a panoramic view of the city lights. "Mr. Richter, it is an honor. Your table is ready. Olivia, our finest server, will be taking care of you this evening." Olivia felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. She had handled celebrities, politicians, and tech moguls, but there was something different about Richter. It was a coldness, a complete lack of acknowledgement that the people serving him were human. As she approached the table, his eyes flicked over her and dismissed her in the same instant. She ceased to be a person and became a function. "Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Olivia, and I will be your server. May I begin with some water for the table? We have still or sparkling." Richter didn't look at her. He waved a dismissive hand. "Still, and bring the wine list. The real one, not the list you give to tourists." The evening had begun. Olivia took a deep, steadying breath, smoothed her apron, and retreated to the background, unaware that she was on a collision course with a man who believed his wealth made him a king, and that she, in his eyes, was less than a peasant. The dinner service for Klaus Richter's table was a masterclass in tension. He was a man who seemed to derive pleasure from finding fault. The bread baked in-house that morning was passable. The amuse-bouche was uninspired. He sent his first glass of wine back, a 1982 Chateau Margaux that cost $2,500 a bottle, claiming it was improperly decanted. Mr. Dubois, sweating under the pressure, personally oversaw the second bottle, his hands trembling slightly. Olivia remained a pillar of professional calm. She anticipated every need, refilled water glasses before they were half empty, and cleared plates with silent efficiency. She ignored the condescending tone, the way Richter would speak about her to his guests as if she weren't there. "In Germany, service is an art, a profession," he'd say loudly in English, gesturing vaguely in her direction. "Here, it's a temporary stop for aspiring actors and failures." Olivia's jaw tightened, but her expression remained serene. She thought of Liam. She thought of the overdue bill for his specialized art therapy sessions, the one thing that seemed to bring him out of the shell he'd retreated into after their parents' death. For Liam, she could endure anything. The main courses were served. Richter had ordered the Wagyu steak, cooked medium rare. Olivia placed the plate before him with practiced care. He picked up his knife and fork, sliced a small piece, and chewed it with theatrical slowness. A frown creased his brow. He put his utensils down with a deliberate clatter. "This is medium," he declared to the table, "not medium rare. A chef in a restaurant of this caliber should be able to distinguish the two. It speaks to a profound lack of discipline." Mr. Dubois was at the table in an instant, apologizing profusely. Olivia knew, and the chef would later confirm, that the steak was a perfect medium rare. But Richter wasn't interested in the food. He was interested in the performance of power. As the evening wore on, and more wine was consumed, Richter grew bolder. Believing he was cocooned in a bubble of linguistic privacy, he switched to his native German to speak with his two associates. He clearly assumed that no one in an American restaurant, certainly not the hired help, would understand the sharp, guttural consonants of his mother tongue. Olivia was clearing the appetizer plates when the first comment, sharp as a shard of glass, hit her ears. "Schau sie dir an," Richter murmured to one of his lieutenants, a smirk playing on his lips. "Look at her. So robotic. There is no soul in these people." Olivia's breath hitched, but she gave no outward sign. Her German was more than fluent. It was academic. Her father, a diplomat, had been stationed in Berlin for 6 years. She had attended a German gymnasium for middle school, dreaming in German before she dreamt of college. The language was a part of her, a precious link to her father and a life that now felt like a distant fantasy. She continued her work, her movements fluid and unbroken. But now she was listening. The conversation continued, a low, venomous stream flowing under the polite English facade they maintained for Mr. Chen. They discussed the business deal they were there to finalize, a multi-billion-dollar acquisition of Mr. Chen's tech company. Richter was trying to impress him, to project an image of absolute control and sophistication. As Olivia leaned in to refill his water glass, Richter didn't even bother to lower his voice. "Wahrscheinlich hat sie die Intelligenz eines Steins," he said, a chuckle in his voice. "She probably has the intelligence of a rock. Good for carrying plates and not much else." His associates laughed, a sycophantic, nervous sound. Mr. Chen, however, remained silent. He watched Olivia, his dark eyes unreadable. Did he understand? Or was he simply observing the strange dynamics of his host? The final, unforgivable insult came near the end of the meal. Olivia was carefully crumbing the table, her focus absolute. One of Richter's associates accidentally nudged a heavy silver fork off the table. It clattered onto the marble floor. It was a simple mistake, but Richter saw an opportunity. He glared at Olivia as if she had been the one to drop it. Then he turned to his guests, a cruel smile twisting his lips, and delivered the line that would change everything. Das ist ungeschickte Rindvieh, he spat, the words dripping with contempt. This clumsy cow. In Deutschland würden Leute wie Sie die Stelle ausmisten, nicht in feinen Restaurants bedienen. Man muss das Personal in Schach halten. This clumsy cow. In Germany, people like her would be cleaning stables, not serving in fine restaurants. You have to keep the staff in their place. Something inside Olivia snapped. It wasn't just an insult to her, it was a desecration of her memories. She heard her father's voice clear as a bell, speaking to her in that same beautiful, precise German. Würde ist das Einzige, was sie dir nicht nehmen können, mein Schatz. Behalte sie immer. Dignity is the one thing they can never take from you, my treasure. Always keep it. The rage, cold and clear, washed over the fear of being fired, the fear of not making rent, the fear for Liam. It all faded into the background, replaced by a sudden, unshakable resolve. She was not a clumsy cow. She was not soulless. She was Olivia Rose, and she would not be his punching bag. She finished crumbing the table. She straightened up to her full height, which wasn't much, but at that moment, she felt like a giant. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was even. She turned her head slightly, her gaze locking directly with Klaus Richter's for the first time that evening. The arctic blue of his eyes met the burning fire in hers. The smirk was still on his face, waiting. The world seemed to slow down. The clinking of distant silverware, the low hum of conversation from other tables, the gentle jazz playing over the speakers, it all faded into a muted backdrop. The only thing that existed was the charged space between the billionaire and the waitress. Klaus Richter's smirk was one of supreme confidence, the look of a man who had never been challenged by someone he considered an inferior. He was waiting for her to scurry away, to be the invisible servant he believed her to be. He was not prepared for what happened next. Olivia held his gaze, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. She took a small, deliberate breath, and then she spoke. The words that came out of her mouth were not the deferential English he expected. They were crisp, formal, and devastatingly perfect High German. Verzeihen Sie, mein Herr, she began, her voice low but carrying the clarity of a bell in the sudden silence of their table. Aber meine Deutschkenntnisse sind mehr als ausreichend, Unhöflichkeit zu erkennen, egal wie reich der Sprecher ist. Excuse me, sir, but my German skills are more than sufficient to recognize rudeness, no matter how wealthy the speaker. The effect was instantaneous and profound. Richter's smirk didn't just vanish. It was wiped from his face, replaced by a slack-jawed expression of pure, unadulterated shock. The color drained from his cheeks. The two German associates froze, their wine glasses halfway to their lips, their eyes wide with horror. They looked as if a ghost had just recited their company's darkest secrets. But Olivia wasn't finished. She held his stunned gaze and continued, her voice gaining a quiet, unshakable strength. Vielleicht sollten Sie sich mehr auf den Anstand und weniger auf die Herabsetzung derer konzentrieren, die Ihnen dienen. Ihr Reichtum kauft Ihnen Essen, aber kauft Ihnen keinen Charakter. Perhaps you should focus more on decency and less on denigrating those who serve you. Your wealth buys you a meal, but it does not buy you character. She delivered the final line with a quiet finality that echoed louder than a shout. Then with a small, almost imperceptible nod, she bent down, picked up the fallen fork with a napkin, and placed it on her service tray. She stood up straight, her duty performed. The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. It was broken by a single sharp sound. Mr. Chen, the quiet Asian guest, slowly and deliberately placing his own fork and knife down on his plate. He hadn't touched his meal since the German insults began. He looked from Richter's ashen face to Olivia's composed one. Then he did something extraordinary. He gave Olivia a slight respectful bow of his head. Richter finally found his voice. The shock was replaced by a surge of volcanic fury. His face contorted, turning a blotchy, dangerous red. The illusion of the sophisticated, powerful patriarch had been shattered, revealing the ugly, sputtering bully beneath. What did you say to me? He snarled, his English thick with a renewed German accent, the mask of his Americanized persona stripped away. Who do you think you are? I am your server, sir. Olivia replied, her voice back to its calm, English-speaking cadence. The contrast was jarring. And I believe you heard me quite clearly. You are fired, he roared, slamming his fist on the table. The water glasses jumped, and a few drops of red wine sloshed onto the pristine white tablecloth like a splash of blood. You are finished. I will have this entire restaurant shut down. Dubois, get over here now. Mr. Dubois, who had been watching from across the room with a look of growing dread, scurried over, his face pale. Mr. Richter, sir, is there a problem? A problem? Richter laughed, a harsh grating sound. This thing, he spat, gesturing at Olivia, insulted me in my own language. She is to be thrown out. Now. All eyes were on Olivia. The other diners were starting to notice the commotion, their curious glances turning into outright stares. Olivia felt a tremor of fear finally cut through the adrenaline. The reality of what she had done crashed down on her. Liam, the rent, the therapy bills. She had stood up for her dignity, but what would it cost her? She looked at Mr. Dubois, her boss, a man she knew was more concerned with profit margins than principles. She saw the conflict in his eyes, but she also saw the inevitable conclusion. He would side with the money. He always did. Olivia, Mr. Dubois said, his voice strained, refusing to meet her eyes. Please, go to my office. We'll talk. It was a coward's dismissal. Olivia knew what it meant. She gave a single sharp nod. She did not look at Klaus Richter again. She turned her back on the table, on the sputtering billionaire, his horrified associates, and the inscrutably silent Mr. Chen. With her head held high, she walked away from the table, her steps even and measured, leaving behind a scene of utter social carnage and a silence that screamed louder than any of Richter's roars. The manager's office was a cramped, windowless room that smelled of stale coffee and anxiety. The conversation was brief and brutal. I have no choice, Olivia. You have to see that, Mr. Dubois said, wringing his hands. He was pacing back and forth behind his cluttered desk. He's Klaus Richter. He could ruin us with a single phone call. He's threatening to post reviews everywhere, to call the critics. He said you were insubordinate, aggressive. I told him his wealth didn't buy him character, Olivia said, her voice flat. Is that an aggressive statement, Mr. Dubois? You spoke back to a guest. You embarrassed him. It doesn't matter what he said or in what language he said it. The first rule is that the customer is always right. Even when he calls me a clumsy cow with the intelligence of a rock? Mr. Dubois had the decency to flinch. I can't have this. Your final paycheck will be mailed to you. Please leave your uniform here. I'll have security escort you out the back. There was no argument to be made. The verdict had been delivered. Olivia stripped off her uniform in the staff locker room, the black and white fabric suddenly feeling like a costume from another life. She changed into her simple jeans and sweater, her movements numb and robotic. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a hollow, terrifying cold. She was escorted out the service entrance into a dark, grimy alley that smelled of garbage and rain. The door clicked shut behind her, a sound of absolute finality. The faint, happy sounds of the restaurant, the music, the laughter, were gone, replaced by the relentless drizzle of a cold city night. The walk home was a blur of streetlights reflecting on wet pavement. Each step was heavy with the weight of her decision. Had she done the right thing? The pride she had felt in that moment of defiance was now battling a tidal wave of panic. How was she going to tell Liam? How would they afford his art classes next month, the ones that were finally helping him process his grief? She saw Richter's face in every puddle she passed, the shock, the rage. She had wounded his pride, a crime for which a man like that would never grant forgiveness. But it was her father's voice that echoed loudest in her mind. Dignity is the one thing they can never take from you. She had kept her dignity, but she had lost her job, her only source of income, her only means of keeping her and Liam afloat. As she fumbled for her keys outside their small apartment building, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a text from her coworker, Maria. Chaos here. Richter and his guests left right after you did. He refused to pay, threw a black Amex on the table, and told Dubois to sue him. The Asian guy, Chen, he didn't even say goodbye to Richter, just walked out separately. A tiny, bitter satisfaction curled in Olivia's gut. She had detonated a bomb, and the fallout was spreading. But it didn't change her situation. She was still jobless, still scared. She opened the door to their apartment as quietly as she could. The lights were off except for a small lamp in the living room, illuminating Liam, who had fallen asleep on the couch, a sketchbook open on his chest. A beautiful, intricate drawing of a bird in flight was taking shape on the page. His talent was undeniable. It was the one pure, hopeful thing in their lives. Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes. She gently took the sketchbook, placed a blanket over her brother, and sat down at their small kitchen table, the weight of the world on her shoulders. She stared at the pile of bills on the counter, her mind racing, trying to come up with a plan. But there was no plan. There was only the cold, hard reality of her unemployment and the looming fear of failure. Just as she was about to surrender to despair, her laptop, which she'd left open on the table, pinged with the notification of a new email. She glanced at it absently. The sender was unknown. The subject line was just 2 words, or a restaurant. Her heart sank. It was probably a formal termination letter from corporate, or worse, a legal notice from Richter's lawyers. With a deep, weary sigh, she clicked it open, preparing for another blow. But the email was not what she expected. It was short, direct, and utterly baffling. Ms. Rose, my name is Amelia Hayes. I was dining at Aura this evening and witnessed the unfortunate events at Mr. Richter's table. Your professionalism under duress and your linguistic skills were remarkable. I am the managing partner at Viridian Capital. We may have a position for which you are uniquely qualified. If you are interested, please be at my office tomorrow at 10 a.m. for an interview. The address is below. P.S. Don't worry about a resume. I already have a good sense of your character. Olivia read the email once, then twice, then a third time. Viridian Capital? She knew the name. It was a major venture capital firm, a direct competitor to the investment arms of conglomerates like Richter Industries. Amelia Hayes? Who was she? Was this a prank? A cruel joke? It had to be. But as she stared at the address, a prestigious skyscraper in the heart of the financial district, a tiny flickering ember of hope ignited in the cold darkness of her fear. It was a wild, impossible chance. But right now, impossible was all she had. Olivia slept in fits and starts, the email from Amelia Hayes replaying in her mind like a fever dream. She woke before dawn, the city still cloaked in a gray, pre-dawn gloom. The email felt less real in the harsh light of morning. It had to be a mistake, or some elaborate, cruel prank orchestrated by Richter as a final act of humiliation. Send the fired waitress on a fool's errand to a top-tier VC firm just to have her laughed out of the lobby. The thought was so in line with his character that she almost deleted the email and tried to forget the whole thing. But the address was real. Viridian Capital was real. And a quick search for Amelia Hayes brought up a slew of articles from Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. She was a powerhouse, a self-made titan in the cutthroat world of venture capital, known for her shrewd investments in disruptive tech and her knack for spotting talent where no one else was looking. She was, in every sense, a rival to men like Klaus Richter. What could a woman like that possibly want with a disgraced waitress? "You're up early," Liam's sleepy voice came from the doorway. He was holding his sketchbook, his hair a mess. "Everything okay? You were quiet when you came in last night." Olivia forced a smile. "Everything's fine, sleepyhead. Just having appointment this morning." She couldn't bring herself to tell him she'd been fired. She couldn't bear to see the worry that would cloud his young face, the face that was already carrying too many burdens. She needed to protect him from this, at least for a little while. "An appointment? That sounds fancy," he said, shuffling to the fridge. "It's probably nothing," she said, trying to manage her own expectations as much as his. By 9:30 a.m., Olivia was standing across the street from the Viridian Capital building, a sleek monolith of glass and steel that seemed to pierce the clouds. She felt profoundly out of place in her one good blazer, a sensible thrift store find that suddenly felt cheap and inadequate. The people flowing in and out of the lobby were a different species, radiating an effortless confidence that came with 6-figure salaries and corner offices. Taking a deep breath, she reminded herself of the woman who had faced down a billionaire. If she could do that, she could walk into a lobby. The receptionist at the front desk was polished and intimidating, but when Olivia gave her name, the woman's professional facade broke into a genuine smile. Ms. Rose, of course. Ms. Hayes is expecting you. 54th floor. Go right on up. The elevator ride was a silent, stomach-churning ascent. Each floor it passed felt like a step further away from her old life and deeper into an unknown, terrifying new world. The doors opened onto a stunningly modern office. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a godlike view of the city. The air was quiet, charged with the hum of silent, focused work. A woman with a warm smile greeted her. Ms. Rose, I'm Sarah, Ms. Hayes' assistant. Please come this way. She was led to a large corner office. A woman stood with her back to the door, looking out at the sprawling cityscape. She turned as Olivia entered, and Olivia recognized her instantly from her internet search, though the pictures hadn't done her justice. Amelia Hayes was in her late 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and an air of calm authority. She was dressed in a simple but elegant navy blue dress. She was not, Olivia noted with a jolt, at any of the tables near Richter's the night before. Ms. Rose, Olivia, thank you for coming, Amelia said, her voice crisp and direct. She gestured to a chair. Please have a seat. Olivia sat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Ms. Hayes, thank you for inviting me. I have to admit, I'm a little confused as to why I'm here. Amelia smiled, a slight knowing curve of her lips. I imagine you are. Let's clear that up. I told you I was at Aura last night, and I was. But I wasn't at a table. I was in a private dining room, one with a direct view of Mr. Richter's booth. She paused, letting the information sink in. My guest for the evening was Mr. Wei Chen. Olivia's eyes widened. Mr. Chen? But he was dining with Mr. Richter. He was, Amelia confirmed. Klaus Richter has been aggressively pursuing a partnership with Mr. Chen's company, a leader in ad-rose robotics and AI. It's a deal worth billions, one that would solidify Richter Industries' dominance for the next decade. Richter thought he had it in the bag. Last night was meant to be the final celebratory dinner before signing the papers this morning. Amelia leaned forward, her expression turning serious. Mr. Chen is a man of traditional values. He believes that how a man treats those with no power is the truest reflection of his soul. He was already having doubts about Richter's aggressive, brutish business style. Last night was a test. He wanted to see the real Klaus Richter in a social setting. A dawning realization began to spread through Olivia. Richter, in his supreme arrogance, Amelia continued, believed that speaking German gave him a cloak of invisibility. He performed for his associates, trying to show them what a powerful, commanding man he was. What he was actually doing was showing Mr. Chen exactly who he is, a petty, cruel bully. And Mr. Chen understood him? Olivia asked, her voice barely a whisper. Oh no, Amelia said with a sharp laugh. Mr. Chen doesn't speak a word of German, but I do, and my German is just as good as yours. The private room was bugged, with Mr. Chen's full knowledge. He was listening to a live translation through an earpiece, provided by my team. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place with dizzying speed. The whole night had been a setup, a test, and Klaus Richter had failed spectacularly. Mr. Chen walked out of that dinner and called me at 6 a.m. this morning, Amelia said, her eyes gleaming with triumph. The Richter deal is dead. He refuses to do business with a man of such profound dishonor, as he put it. Instead, he has decided to partner with Viridian Capital. Olivia was speechless, trying to process the sheer scale of what had happened. She had been a pawn in a multi-billion-dollar corporate chess match. But what does this have to do with me? She finally managed to ask. Everything, Amelia said, her voice softening. Mr. Chen wasn't just disgusted by Richter. He was incredibly impressed by you. He saw your composure, your dignity. And when you responded to Richter, when you stood your ground, not with aggression, but with intelligence and self-respect, you sealed the deal for us. You showed him the kind of character he wants to be in business with. Amelia Hayes stood up and walked to her window, gazing down at the city below. I didn't just bring you here to say thank you, Olivia. My firm has just secured a partnership that will require a great deal of liaison work with German and other European tech firms. We need someone who is not only fluent in German, but who understands the culture. Someone with a background in international relations. someone who is poised under pressure and has unimpeachable character. She turned back to face Olivia, her expression direct and sincere. I pulled your Georgetown academic records this morning. Your professors spoke of you as a prodigy, the kind of student they see once a decade. You were forced to drop out because of a family tragedy. That's a loss, not just for you, but for the world that needs people with your skills. Amelia walked back to her desk and slid a folder across its polished surface towards Olivia. This is a job offer, Olivia, not as a waitress, as a junior analyst and a linguistic liaison for our new European tech division. The starting salary is in that folder. It will be more than enough to take care of you and your brother. All of his art classes, a new apartment, a new life. Olivia's hands trembled as she opened the folder. The number she saw inside made her gasp. It was more money than she had ever dreamed of seeing. It was not just a salary, it was a lifeline. It was freedom. It was a future. The world of high finance is filled with sharks like Klaus Richter, Amelia said quietly. But it also has people who value integrity. People like me and people like Mr. Chen. We believe character is the single greatest asset. And last night, Ms. Rose, you gave the most impressive character interview I have ever seen. Tears welled in Olivia's eyes, not of sadness or fear, but of overwhelming, staggering relief. The impossible had happened. Her single act of defiance, the moment she chose her dignity over her job, hadn't been her ruin. It had been her salvation. The first person Olivia called after leaving the Viridian Capitol building was Liam. She found a small park, a tiny oasis of green amidst the concrete canyons, and sat on a bench the job offer, a thick embossed contract, feeling heavy and surreal in her bag. "Hey, you," she said when he answered, her voice thick with emotion. "Are you sitting down?" "Uh-oh, that's never a good question," he replied, a hint of his usual teenage wit in his voice. "It is today," she said, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. "Liam, I got a new job, a really, really good job." She told him everything. The billionaire, the insults, the perfect German reply. She told him about being fired and the cold walk home, and then about the impossible email, the meeting with Amelia Hayes, and the staggering job offer. She left out the ugliest details of Richter's words, shielding him as always, but he understood the core of it. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. For a moment she worried she had overwhelmed him. "Olivia," he finally said, his voice small and choked, "Dad would be so proud of you." And with those words, the dam broke. Olivia wept, not with the grief and stress that had been her constant companions for 2 years, but with a cathartic release that washed through her entire being. She had done it. She had honored her father's memory. She had protected their family. She had won. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Olivia's life transformed at a speed that left her breathless. She went from serving canapes to analyzing market reports on German tech startups. Her background in linguistics and international relations, which she had thought was a useless relic of a dead dream, was now her greatest professional asset. She was a natural bridging cultural and communication gaps between the American investors at Viridian and their new German partners. Amelia Hayes was a true mentor. She saw Olivia's raw talent and refined it, teaching her the intricacies of venture capital, guiding her through presentations, and trusting her with increasing levels of responsibility. For the first time since her parents' death, Olivia felt like she was not just surviving, but thriving. She was no longer invisible. She had a voice, and powerful people listened to it. They moved out of their cramped apartment and into a bright, spacious 2-bedroom in a safe neighborhood, with a room for Liam that had perfect morning light for his art. She enrolled him in the best youth art program in the city, and the change in him was profound. The haunted look in his eyes began to fade, replaced by the passion and excitement of a young artist discovering his purpose. One afternoon, about 2 months into her new job, Amelia called Olivia into her office. "We have a preliminary meeting with the board of the Autonet Consortium from Stuttgart," Amelia said, handing Olivia a file. "They're looking for American investment to fund their next-gen autonomous driving technology. It's the biggest deal in the sector. Every major firm is fighting for a piece of it, including Richter Industries. I want you to lead the linguistic and cultural portion of the presentation." Olivia's heart hammered in her chest. This was a huge step, a massive vote of confidence. The day of the presentation arrived. Olivia, dressed in a sharp, perfectly tailored suit that Amelia's personal shopper had helped her pick, walked into the Viridian Capital boardroom. The German executives were already seated, a formidable group of older men in conservative suits. And sitting on the opposite side of the table, as part of another firm vying for the deal, was a face she would never forget: Klaus Richter. He didn't see her at first. He was deep in conversation with one of his own analysts, his expression sour and impatient. He looked older than she remembered, the arrogance in his face edged with a new layer of stress. Rumors had been flying through the financial world about the colossal deal he had lost with Mr. Chen's company. It was a humiliating, multi-billion-dollar blunder that had apparently shaken investor confidence in his leadership. His empire was not crumbling, but a definite crack had appeared in the foundation. Amelia started the meeting. "Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. I am Amelia Hayes, and this is my team. I'd like to introduce our lead analyst for this project, Olivia Rose." As Amelia said her name, Klaus Richter's head snapped up. His arctic blue eyes widened in stunned disbelief. He stared at Olivia, seeing not a waitress in a black uniform, but a poised, confident executive standing at the head of the room, holding the attention of some of the most powerful men in the German auto industry. The woman he had called a clumsy cow was now his direct competitor. A flicker of something, fear, humiliation, fury, crossed his face before he masked it with a sneer. But the damage was done. Everyone in the room saw his reaction, the personal animosity that had no place in a professional setting. Olivia met his gaze, her expression calm and neutral. There was no triumph in her eyes, no hint of gloating. There was only a quiet, steely confidence. She didn't need to say a word. Her presence, her position, her success, it was a far more eloquent rebuttal than any insult she could ever have devised. She turned her attention to the German executives and began her presentation. She started in flawless English, laying out the market analysis, and then she seamlessly transitioned into German. "Meine Herren, lassen Sie uns nun die kulturellen Synergien und die einzigartigen Möglichkeiten einer transatlantischen Partnerschaft erörtern. Gentlemen, let us now discuss the cultural synergies and the unique opportunities of a transatlantic partnership." Her German was not just fluent, it was elegant, sophisticated, and deeply respectful of the business culture she was addressing. The German executives, initially stiff and formal, visibly relaxed. They began to nod, to engage, to ask questions directly to her. She had not just their attention, she had their respect. Across the table, Klaus Richter sat in stony, impotent silence. He was forced to listen as the woman he had tried to humiliate masterfully commanded the room in his own language, building a bridge he had tried to burn. Every articulate sentence she spoke was a testament to his catastrophic misjudgment. He had looked at a diamond and seen only a piece of glass, and now that diamond was cutting him out of the biggest deal of the year. The hum in the Viridian Capital boardroom after the German executives departed was electric. The presentation had not just gone well, it had been a home run. The AutoNet Consortium's CEO, a stern, imposing man named Herr Schmidt, had broken his formal demeanor to engage Olivia in a detailed 10-minute conversation in German, his questions sharp and insightful, probing her analysis. He had walked away nodding, a rare smile touching his lips as he shook her hand firmly. "Frau Rose," he'd said, his voice a gravelly baritone, "your understanding is as impressive as your fluency. You have given us much to consider." Her Viridian colleagues were buzzing. They clapped her on the shoulder, their faces alight with admiration. She had been the team's secret weapon, and she had performed flawlessly. Amelia Hayes watched from across the room, a look of profound maternal pride on her face. Olivia felt a warmth spread through her chest, a feeling of belonging and professional validation that was entirely new and deeply gratifying. Amidst the quiet celebration, the remnants of Klaus Richter's team were packing their briefcases in a grim, hurried silence. Richter himself stood apart, a pillar of thunderous rage, his face pale and tight. He had been rendered a spectator at his own high-stakes pitch, forced to watch the woman he had dismissed as a cow charm and impress the very men he needed to win over. As Olivia gathered her notes, She felt a cold presence beside her. Richter had moved with a predator's silence and was standing so close she could feel the icy fury radiating from him. He waited until the last of his team had exited, leaving them in the room with only Amelia, who was now watching them with a hawk's intensity from her position by the door. He leaned in, his voice a low, venomous hiss of German, meant for her ears alone. "Sie denken, Sie sind klug," he whispered, the words dripping with contempt. "You think you are clever? You played your little trick and it worked for you. But you are still what you have always been. Nothing. A waitress who got a lucky break. When this novelty wears off, you will be back to serving coffee. A fluke does not change one's nature." Olivia felt a flicker of the old fear, the instinct to shrink back, to apologize, to placate the angry man. But it was just a ghost, a muscle memory from a life that was no longer hers. In its place was a profound and unshakable calm. She did not feel anger or a desire for revenge. Looking at this immensely wealthy, powerful, and utterly miserable man, she felt an emotion that would have shocked her months ago: pity. She took a small step back, creating a more professional distance between them, and met his arctic gaze without flinching. When she spoke, her voice was not a whisper, but clear, measured, and in perfect English, ensuring Amelia could hear every word. "Mr. Richter, I am not clever for speaking a language I've known since childhood. I am not a trickster for having a university education you knew nothing about, and I am certainly not a fluke." She paused, letting her words hang in the air. "The only fluke, as you call it, was the incredible fortune I had of being in the right place at the right time to witness you showing Mr. Chen and Ms. Hayes your true character. You didn't just insult a waitress that night, you revealed your entire business philosophy. You believe people without power are worthless. You believe cruelty is a private luxury. You believe your wealth makes you untouchable." She looked at him, her gaze unwavering. "So I suppose I should thank you. You single-handedly blew up your own multi-billion-dollar deal, and in the process, you opened a door for me I never would have found on my own. You've taught me a valuable lesson, that a person's greatest liability is a character like yours." With a final polite nod, the kind an executive gives to a dismissed subordinate, she turned her back on him. She walked towards Amelia, leaving Klaus Richter standing alone in the center of the vast boardroom. He was speechless, his face a mask of apoplectic rage. He had come to deliver a final cutting blow to put her back in her place. Instead, she had calmly dissected his failure and exposed him for what he was, not with insults, but with the simple, devastating truth. He made a strangled sound and then stormed from the room, a titan defeated not by a rival army, but by the quiet dignity of a single underestimated woman. 2 weeks later, the news became official. Viridian Capital had secured the exclusive American partnership with the Autonet Consortium. The deal was worth a fortune, launching the firm into the stratosphere. Olivia's name was mentioned specifically in the press release as a key architect of the Transatlantic Alliance. Her career didn't just skyrocket, it went supernova. Amelia promoted her to senior analyst, gave her a corner office, and made her the head of the new division she had helped to build. The life she and Liam now lived was a universe away from the one they had known. The constant, gnawing anxiety over bills and rent was replaced by a quiet sense of security. The true change, however, was not in the material things, though they were wonderful. It was in the shedding of a weight she hadn't even realized she was carrying. It was the freedom to breathe, to plan, to dream. She found the most joy in providing for Liam. The day she wrote a check for his elite art program, covering the entire year's tuition in a single payment, was more satisfying than receiving her own first significant bonus. Seeing the relief and excitement on her brother's face was the real dividend. He blossomed, his talent nurtured by the best instructors, his spirit healed by the ability to pour his grief, his hope, and his joy onto the canvas. That summer, Olivia took him to Berlin. It was a trip she had dreamed of, but never thought possible. It wasn't just a vacation, it was a pilgrimage. She took him to the Tiergarten, where she'd walked with their father on crisp autumn afternoons, and told him stories of how her dad would quiz her on German vocabulary using the trees and statues as flashcards. They ate currywurst from a street vendor he had sworn was the best in the city. She showed him the imposing edifice of the gymnasium she had attended, its stern architecture suddenly seeming less intimidating and more like a cherished part of her history. One warm evening, they sat at an outdoor cafe in a quiet, leafy square, the gentle murmur of German conversation a comforting backdrop. Liam was sketching with intense focus, his charcoal stick flying across the page. He was drawing the scene before him, but he had captured more than just the buildings and people. He had caught the feeling of the place, the peaceful, golden light. He paused, looking up at his sister, who was gazing at the scene with a soft smile. "You know," he said, his voice thoughtful, "I've been trying to remember the last time I saw you look like this. So calm. I don't think I've seen you this happy since before. Well, before." His words struck a chord deep inside her. He was right. For 2 years, her happiness had been a fleeting, fragile thing, always overshadowed by the next bill, the next worry. Now it felt solid, real, and rooted deep within her. She thought of Klaus Richter. She imagined him in a boardroom like the one she now commanded, or in a sterile, opulent mansion, surrounded by priceless objects, but impoverished in spirit. His wealth was a fortress, but it was also his prison, locking him in a world where everyone was a subordinate, an enemy, or a tool. He would never know the simple, profound richness of this moment, sitting in a beautiful city with someone she loved, feeling safe, feeling purposeful, feeling free. "I'm happy, Liam," she said, her voice full of a conviction that resonated to her core. "I really, truly am. I feel like I finally get what Dad was always talking about." "What was that?" he asked, his eyes curious. "That your character is your fortune. It's the one thing you own outright. People can take your job, your money, your home, but your dignity, your integrity, that's your real wealth." Richter had billions of dollars, but he was bankrupt. He lost everything that mattered because he never understood that. She reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "We're rich, Liam. We always have been." He smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached his eyes. He turned back to his sketchbook, and with a few deft strokes, he began to draw her, sitting there in the golden Berlin twilight, her face illuminated by a quiet, triumphant peace. He wasn't just capturing his sister. He was capturing a portrait of a woman who had faced down a giant and discovered the unshakable strength that had been inside her all along. Olivia's story is a powerful reminder that there is a quiet strength in those society often overlooks. It's about more than just a billionaire getting his comeuppance. It's about the unshakable power of dignity. Klaus Richter's wealth gave him authority, but Olivia's character gave her true power. She proved that your circumstances don't define your worth, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply speak your truth, even when your voice is shaking. Her life was changed not by a lottery ticket or a lucky break, but by a single courageous choice to demand respect. How many Olivias are out there, with incredible talents hidden in plain sight? This story is for every person who has ever been underestimated, insulted, or made to feel small. Your potential is your own, and no one can take it from you. If this story resonated with you and you believe in the power of character, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that inspire. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss a moment. And please share in the comments below. Have you ever had a moment where you had to stand up for your dignity? We'd love to hear your story.